If you're installing a system that spans the entire warehouse and you don't want to deal with columns being off because they're not going to be perfect throughout the building, you can define a two-axis datum line. So here you can see the integrator define this blue line here and this blue line here as the X and Y datum line. So after you've defined that datum line in your CAD drawing, you'll pull all center lines and endos and other dimensions off that datum line. It makes it more accurate if you don't make it coincide with the column grid like here, because here you'd just be popping chalk lines between center of these columns, and those would all be at a slightly different angle depending on how far off the columns are from where the drawing says they are. So if you bring your datum off that column grid, let's say something nice like 10 foot here, when we get in the building, we'd measure 10 foot over from the farthest column this way that we need, and then 10 feet over from this column down here, and then we'd pop a line between the 2 points. So let's say this column and this last column are up to a ½ inch away from where the drawing says they are. You're going to have your datum line straight, but at just a very slight angle off from what the drawing shows, and that's as accurate as you're going to get. Now, without getting out some surveying equipment or drawing a huge 3 to 4 to 5 triangle throughout the building to make sure you have a 90-degree angle here, you're not going to know how accurate those two lines are. So it's good to think about what is the worst that it's going to be. So when you pop this west to east line, if the column over here's a little bit off in the north direction and this one's off in the south direction, you'll have a very slightly angled line. I'm just exaggerating here so you can see better. And then this line could be off at an angle as well. So you're going to have two straight lines, but they may be at something slightly greater or less than 90 degrees here. Or in a rare instance, I guess they could be exactly 90 degrees and just rotated off the axis a little bit. So it's good to think about those, not really hypothetical scenarios because one of them is taking place, but just to think through how bad could it be. And the answer is your datum lines would be straight between the 2 points you popped them, but your whole system may be off a degree or two, which doesn't matter. And it's probably a better idea if you don't run that datum line through this pick mod accidentally or anything else that's already existing. So that's the most accurate way to do it, but almost every install we do where we're basing everything off of columns, we don't have any issues anyway, because we first go in and measure column to column all the way across the grid that we're going to be using and find out if the columns are off at all. And then if we come to a place where we know the columns are through our center line off, we'll just run parallel to the center line we already popped. And the same thing happens when you're running, let's say this run of conveyor back here is 400 foot. By the time you get here and make this turn, it's probably 400 foot and an inch because it's not going to be the exact length as the drawing says. So after running this long run, I'll double check that I'm still on center line down here. And then now that I'm starting to turn this corner and run this conveyor, I'll just run parallel to our center line on the floor. And since you're dealing with stuff like that, I always like to start at the most critical point. Like for example, here we started near the dock doors because we want to make sure these fall in line with the center of those doors. So we installed the sorter first, and then we had a team that could build this way, those spurs off of that sorter around here, while another team worked it backwards going this way. And another reason this always works out for us is because we don't anchor anything until the whole system is done. So then you should never run into anything where you have to cut conveyor to fit. And really, if there's a critical point that you're tying into some other system or some other machine, I would start building there. That's your critical start point. So I guess really the worst case scenario would be if you built something all the way around here and then you had to skip a whole mark number for some big job where you got shipping delays, and then you'd skip it and you're continuing to build. But what we'll do there is if you're off an inch, we'll just go in there, and we got knee braces on, so we'll just bump all those legs with our boots for a few minutes, and we'll have that conveyor moved an inch or two in no time. If it's something like you got to move 6 inches and you got your knee braces on, we'll put the forklift in there and side shift it slowly as everybody's working to make sure none of the legs fold. But all these little tricks a good installer should know.